When I was in middle school, one of the local metro parks was overrun with deer. Hunting was prohibited in the park and the population had exploded. They were starting to cause serious damage to the trees during the winter and the meadows weren't enough to sustain them during the summer. It was proposed the park be opened up to limited deer hunting to get the population under control. This set off a lot of emotions on both sides, yet despite being about as pro-animal as you can get, my family sided with the hunters. My parents explained to me that the deer couldn't be allowed to go unchecked because they were destroying the park and would eventually suffer when they ran out of food. Better for them to be hunted than for them to starve to death. My most direct involvement in this debate was when I was approached by a girl getting signatures to block the proposal. I refused and she tried to guilt trip me by saying that I was against the poor deer. I explained what my parents told me and she simply blew me off and continued to collect signatures. This and another personal experience I'll get into later is why I can't enjoy bats. Listening to Fluttershy's argument for letting the bats have their way with the apple orchard reminded me of that short-sighted girl who only saw poor innocent deer being shot and not realizing letting things continue like they were would do more damage to not only the deer themselves but to the park as a whole. And seeing many analysts side with Fluttershy without thinking through the problem only makes it all the more troubling. I am an environmentalist. I believe it is the duty of humanity to maintain Earth's environment and its rich biodiversity. After all, it is in our best interest that the environment be healthy. However, environmentalism is a complicated subject with caveats and apparent contradictions. That is because our environment is complicated. It's these complexities that bats failed to grasp. It delivered a horribly mangled message based on pseudoscience, and the fact so many analysts not only accepted but regurgitated that pseudoscience troubled me. It makes me honestly fear what children took away from this episode if adults bought it hook, line, and sinker. What's been particularly troubling is the prevalent use of the term speciesism. I hate this word. How it's used in relationship with this episode is a fallacy. It's a dangerous fallacy pushed by the animal rights loons that undermines the greater environmentalist and anti-animal exploitation messages. It's meant to make us feel guilty for pursuing our interests if it impacts another species, no matter the environmental reality. It also suggests only sapient life can have a negative impact on the environment. This, of course, ignores the real damage plants and animals can do in certain environments. The emerald ash borer has killed as many as 100 million ash trees in North America and threatens a population of trees that outnumbers the human race. Is it speciesism to want to keep the emerald ash borer from destroying ash trees? Similarly, the vampire bats are a destructive force in the apple orchard. Not only did they destroy the current apple crop, but they severely damaged the trees themselves, hampering their growth and productivity. Their larger size and more belligerent disposition likely also forces other less destructive species like the normal fruit bats out of the orchard. They're pests, and any environmentalist would look at the results of their presence and agree they had to be removed. This episode's grasp on environmental science is so bad, Captain Planet handled the subject better. When it did an episode on pest control, it firmly said humans dealing with pests is right. The debate was over the method. The traditional method for controlling boll weevils in this case was using pesticides, but those pesticides can cause great collateral damage to the environment, as well as lead to pesticide-resistant boll weevils. The alternative method proposed was to introduce a species of wasps that preyed on the boll weevils and work in concert with nature. And if Friendship is Magic had been directed at older kids and actually cared about this debate, they would have had Applejack take the extreme position of killing off the bats, while Fluttershy would have wanted to capture them alive and take them somewhere where they wouldn't be a problem. Instead, Applejack has a reasonable position of removing the bats without necessarily killing them, and Fluttershy is the extremist, saying that they should give a part of the orchard to the bats, despite nothing stopping them from leaving that area and continuing on what they're doing. It's like she doesn't see the damage the bats are causing or doesn't care. Bats tried to sidestep that it was advocating the rights of pests to be pests by saying the vampire fruit bats weren't really pests. The seeds they spit out grow into stronger apple trees, so they were trying to claim that their message was making short-term sacrifice for greater gains in the future. However, the episode once again failed to grasp the complexity of the concept. Yes, it can be a good thing to sacrifice immediate benefits or even endure short-term hardship so you can reap greater rewards in the future. It's something that this country needs to get back in touch with. However, it must be understood that there are thresholds. There is a point where the short-term sacrifice is too great, or the future rewards are too small or won't be realized for too long to justify it. For one thing, this episode fails to mention we don't even grow apple trees from seeds. Like many perennial fruits, we create new apple trees by grafting. This is because apple trees inherit few traits through reproduction, making selective breeding almost impossible. Growing viable apple trees from seeds would take decades and require a lot of work. So Applejack would be as old as Granny Smith before she even began to see the benefits of the vampire fruit bats. I highly doubt the new trees would be productive enough to justify that kind of a wait. Now I can already hear some people saying I'm overthinking this. This is just a show for little kids. I should concentrate more on rarity in the suit, or Pinkie Pie's antics that were almost lovable, or the fact that we got an Applejack and Fluttershy episode, or other rattling keys this episode had. However, it's the fact that this is a kid show that troubles me. We aren't talking about storytelling elements or characterizations here. This episode entered a debate it was ill prepared for and delivered a terrible message to an impressionable audience. It vindicates and glorifies an extreme position and spurns a more reasonable one. It could warp children's understanding of the environmental issue and lead to them either taking stances so extreme they damage the environment, like that girl in my middle school, or be more susceptible to those who say caring about the environment is too hard for humanity. This episode is harmful, and that potential to do harm outweighs any superficial good that might come out of it. Now I can already hear some people saying I'm over